everybody, and I want to say thank you so much for keeping your comments focused on the item that's in front of you. So I want to, first I want to say that I would like for this item for the Compassion Saves model to be given to the task force to review, to evaluate, and to give direction on. That is the intent of this item, to give kind of the box so that you guys have something to work on. It was not the intention to write policy and to do the fine-tuning of a department. We never do that as council, direct every single detail of a department. So I hope that you guys walk out of here understanding that that is the goal of this, which is exactly what you've asked. And it took a lot of work to get here. It took meetings with, I believe it's 4 meetings with the No Kill group, and phone calls with people, and coffee in people's homes at 9 in the morning, going line by line. And so your commitment and your passion is why we are here. And so I want to thank you for your comments, because it does pay off. Specifically, I would like the task force to look at what it would take and hopefully get us to a place where we have an independent adoption program. An independent adoption program. And I know that that is a tough task sometimes to think about, but we are not going to be able to get to an independent adoption program until we do the very first step, which is understanding the relationship with SPCLA and our shelter. And I know that my co-lead on this item, Councilwoman Price, is going to give some of the details to that and trying to get that information to come back as soon as possible. We need to have that information that we don't have, and I'm going to let her, so we don't echo comments, talk in detail about that. I will say that I hope that whatever we have come back from the city attorney that comes from Councilwoman Price, that comes back at a reasonable time, 30, 60 days, so that we can really understand where we're at with that. So independent adoption program, that we have open admission, and that is defined by having reduced or no fees for relinquishing your pets at our shelter. We know that that has to happen to be able, often when people have a pet, particularly dogs, it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's more work than some people understand, and they need to know that they can safely take their pet somewhere that will not euthanize them. And so that is what an open admission shelter means to me, and I think means to many of you. So this is hopefully a step to get us there, where you feel that trust and that we get that put into policy down the road, clear as day. I would like also to have the task force and city staff look at what is currently happening with our adoption fees and making sure that those are going to our spay and neuter fund, and understanding what that balance is and what we need to do to ensure that everybody, including the SPCA, is paying those adoption fees so that we can have a spay and neuter program on the front end that will be meaningful. I do not believe that any one solution, adoption or fostering or spay and neutering, not one of those is going to get us to a no-kill shelter or a 90% rate, but it is going to take all of these measures to get us there. I also want to make sure that we call out in this, again, and this was general for that reason, because it's not my intention to direct policy in that way. So I appreciate the task force, and you guys will have a chance to go through this. I also want to make sure that when we talk about our robust communication program, that we have an understanding of what our communication team at the shelter has right now. How are we relaying that information to our constituents, to the neighboring cities, about what animals are available, and that we have an understanding of the resources that you have now that we gave you in the last budget. Is that enough, and will it take more? My expectation is that you guys do the work in the task force looking at the Compassion Saves model and defining what the Compassion Saves model is. It is not for staff to define. It is not only for council to define, but it is for us as a community together to define. And that is why we wanted to start this conversation, so you have that work ahead of you in the next several months, along with the community members that come to the task force. I look forward to having the conversation about all of these programs. I look forward to the budget conversation on what it's going to take to make this real. And I ask that my colleagues join us in voting yes to ensure that a compassion saves model is something that really does save lives and gets us to the lowest euthanasia rate possible. So thank you again for my colleagues for working on this with us.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilwoman Price.
Thank you. I want to first start out by thanking my colleague, Councilmember Pearce. We joined forces on this item. We actually had two items that we merged into one, and we're both kind of leading a different part of the item. So I'm happy that we're having this conversation. It's been many years that we've heard from the various groups, and to be quite honest, it wasn't until recently that I actually understood how the conversation should be framed. And I've shared with the advocates that sometimes when we feel passionately about something, conveying what it is we're trying to say in a way that allows us to be heard is difficult because there's so much passion behind it. So I appreciate the respectful dialogue that those who have requested to meet with me have had with me. It's allowed me to see things from a different and I think clearer context. So, and I think that's the reason we're having this conversation. So you know who you are. Thank you for allowing that respectful dialogue to get us to this point. I echo what Councilmember Pearce has said in regards to this being a starting point for us and us being able to work in collaboration with the task force to further define practices and policies as we move forward. I do think it's a good starting point. I'm grateful that we have our new director with us, Animal Care Services Director with us. The portion of the item that's mine and one that I intend to follow up on at every step of the process is understanding some of the details of the discussion. And let me tell you what I mean about that. A lot of times we, behind the dais and even out in the community, have debates with people about various issues. And what I have always said is that I'm happy to debate anyone about anything and agree to disagree if that's the case. But it's important that we're all operating on the same fact sheet. Because if we're having a debate and somebody is under one set of facts and someone else is under a different set of facts, look, given my profession and my training, there are some things that are gray areas and some things that are disputed, but there are a whole lot of facts that are undisputed if we take the time to ascertain what they are. And from there, I think we can have a solid foundation for a debate. And the problem that I've had with this issue for a long time is that there's a lot of assertions or allegations or statements that are made that we've never actually been able to fact check or ascertain, allowing for us who are not experts in that industry to not be able to get into the weeds on some of the things. And not that I'm saying I want to get into the weeds. Trust me, I don't. That's why we hire staff that are specialists in this area. You don't want a prosecutor making decisions about animal care services. You want an animal care specialist to be making decisions about animal care services. We're here to get data and help lead policy, but we're looking for direction and leadership from Stacy and her supervisor, the director of their division, to help us lead that framework. But I do think there are a few issues that have come to light. Whether they have merit or not, I don't know. But I cannot continue to have this conversation without, for myself, knowing some pieces of information. So the portion of the agenda item that I wrote up and one that I hope to continue, and I expect staff will keep us updated with this. I do expect we'll get a report back. But if not, I'll probably agendize another item to get this information, and I'll tell you why. What I wrote in the agenda item is the city has welcomed a new director for the Animal Care Services Division, and this development presents an opportunity for us to review our existing relationships, practices, commitments, and policies, and to realign the same as we develop a strategic plan. Accurate information regarding the inner workings of the agreements between the allied partners will help set the framework for a solid foundation from which to engage in discussion and debate. Without this information, speculation and implication may lead to poor policy and or distrust in the direction we determine is the best course of action for the city of Long Beach. What do I mean by that? And I'll express it very clearly. So when I talk about specific information about inner workings, we've talked, and Stacy touched upon it in her presentation to us a few weeks ago, about the just in general, she went over the lease relationship and the relationship of the parties. We do have allied partners, obviously, and I think it's important for us as a council to understand the terms of the lease agreement with a little bit more clarity. So and I'm not saying we need to know necessarily the terms of the lease agreement, but in general, we need to know what are the terms of the lease agreement, what are the responsibilities of each entity, is there compliance from each of the entities in regards to the expectations and the understandings of the parties in regards to their various obligations under the lease agreement. So that's something that I would like included in this item in terms of a report back. And whether that's the city manager who does it or whether it's the city attorney, we'd like to identify, where we're at and are there opportunities for us to have a little bit more compliance with the terms of the agreement. In terms of the different facilities, I would like us to understand what is the allocation of space in the context of the intended use of the two facilities. Are we exercising best practices in terms of the allocation of that space? And that can come back as a report back with the opinion of our Animal Care Services Director. I do think I was here when we went through our spay and neuter policy and enacted that. I think it's an interesting point that has been raised regarding the spay and neuter trust account. I'd love to get a report back on that. What is that account? Or what are we using it for? What options do we have for the future? And then there's one thing that, and I don't know what the answer to this is, but there has been repeatedly allegations that there are aspects of the lease that have been kept confidential. And I don't know if that's true, and I don't know why that is, and perhaps that's a subject of closed session. I don't know. Mr. Parkin, are you aware, are there aspects of this lease that are confidential?
There are no aspects of the lease that I'm aware of that are confidential.
Okay, so that's what I had heard as well, and that struck me as odd. I don't really read anything into it because even if there were aspects that are confidential, I'm mindful of the fact that there are legal agreements at times where for protection of the parties, things may be kept confidential. That's not an issue for me. I just know that we've heard that allegation repeatedly, and I'd like some clarity on that. So for me, what I would like is, we get a lot of reports back from city staff with a lot of information. And sometimes the reports back that we get are very general and somewhat vague and more have a theme as opposed to actual data. The report back that I would like on this item is actual data so that to council, so that we can have, if we're hearing something at the podium that is not accurate, we'll be able to know that based on the data that we have. If we're hearing something that is accurate and there's an opportunity for us to improve, then that allows us an opportunity to grow from the data that our staff is providing us. I want the staff, no disrespect to the audience at all or to the advocates, I want the data from our staff because it is that data that's going to drive our policy. So we can debate the data once we get it, but let's get that data and the methodology that was used to get that data. Let's trust that methodology together. So if there's a question as to the methodology, we can talk about it. But let's start with the same set of facts, and from there we can build. Because one thing in this debate that for 5 years I have felt very strongly about is there's a lot of allegations, but there's not a lot of data, and there hasn't been. So we need to know that information so that we can move forward. So I am requesting as part of this item that we receive a report back within 60 days regarding the specific items that I mentioned in regards to the lease agreement, the facility evaluation, the spay and neuter trust account, and that's it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Guys, please, no, nothing from the dais, please. I mean, from the audience right now.
Yeah, and I'm sorry,
Please,
Mr.
no,
Mayor.
please,
One
of
thing I
course.
forgot. When I was talking about the lease agreement, I know that each entity has responsibilities in terms of what they're responsible for, maintenance, payments, that kind of thing. What utility bills, things like that. So what are the different responsibilities, and are we all in compliance? If not, is there an opportunity for us to improve? So I just want to get a handle on that, because that information, I believe, has to come to me from our staff. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Mungo.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what Councilwoman